I'm Jasmine Moradi, and you're listening to the Queens of Tech podcast, a podcast series about raising the voice of workplace champions. 60 plus questions in around 30 to 40 minutes with women of color, non-binary, and transgender influencers about their journey into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I started the Queens of Tech podcast initiative in May 2022 because I would like to retain more women of color, non-binary, and transgenders in the tech industry. Talent is out there, but our work environment needs to improve for all to feel safer, stay authentic, and to be valued for our contributions. My vision is to raise the workplace ecosystem for all in tech by killing the imposter syndrome, stopping bad behavior, and increasing equity opportunities. Each podcast talk is built around 60 plus questions regarding upbringing, education, career path, DIB, and future advice. My mission is to bridge the gap between schools and workplaces by getting into the heart of my guest's personal life and career journey to inspire other girls, women of color, non-binary, and transgenders to unleash their full potential to reach top leadership roles in the tech industry. My goal is to raise the voices of tech champions around the world and together with companies, investors, and politicians, raise the challenges and opportunities around equity, inclusive, diversity, and belonging in our workplaces. Enough is enough. I would like to enforce companies to build a sustainable, inclusive culture to retain diverse talent so we keep the workforce power equity to continue building future diverse and inclusive products. Representation matters. Your voice matters. In this episode, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Tech Queen Abbey, founder and CEO at Fortifai. Hi, Abbey.
Hello. Thanks for having me today.
Well, I'm very happy to have you joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's been already a busy morning, but I'm very excited to be here.
Glad to hear. Now, let us dive into your journey into STEM. Hope you're ready for the Queens of Tech 60 plus questions.
I'm ready.
Let's warm up with a few fun facts about you. How would you describe your personality in 3 hashtags?
Fun, #ambitious, #outgoing.
How would you describe your life in 3 sentences or hashtags?
Spontaneous adventures filled with learning, challenges, and opportunities.
What kind of music stimulates and motivates you the most?
Eurotrance from late 90s to early 2000s.
What's your personal motto?
If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
What is your favorite book?
Invisible Women by Caroline Perez, because it makes you realize how the world was designed for men and the data that biases it.
What is your favorite podcast?
I have to say ESG in Practice, which is my new podcast that just launched.
Congratulations. Mac or PC?
Mac.
Say something interesting about you that most people don't know.
That I have a black belt in Shotokan karate.
What is your hidden talent?
Not sure it's so hidden from my friends, but most people probably don't know that I can sleep for a very long time.
Long is long time.
Well, I think yesterday was 10 hours.
If you were going to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Work in progress.
Great start, Abbey. Now, let us dig deeper. Our childhood has an effect on our adulthood. Our earliest experience shape our belief about ourselves, others, and the world. Now, I want to discover your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Bay Area, in the heart of Silicon Valley.
What was your dream job as a child?
I actually don't remember what my dream job is. I had the typical tiger parents that just had me doing a lot of homework, doing a lot of activities. So I don't think I had time to dream.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Ironically, with my strict parents, my actual favorite subject was history.
What was your least favorite subject?
English.
What is your earliest memory of technology and the arrival of the internet?
Gosh, I don't know if this is going to age me, but I think I was 14 when I got my first computer processor, as they were called at the time. And then 15 getting a computer with a modem, and then taking coding classes at the local junior college by my house.
Which other two technology gadgets did you own?
The first was a computer. I probably didn't get my cell phone until I started college, if that ages me a little bit. I think I got my first laptop when I went to college.
Who was your female role model growing up and why?
There's so many, but I think that Hillary Clinton would be one of my role models, just based on her intellect, her ambition. But I think more importantly was her grace in the face of adversity and setback.
How do you think where you grew up and the school you went to and the generation you come from influence your education and career choice?
Definitely, I think I realized that I grew up in Silicon Valley at the growth of the internet and tech. So I think that really influenced me. A lot of high school friends have gone into the industry, and my dad was a computer programmer, computer engineer. So definitely saw the opportunities from growing up in the Bay Area in technology.
Very interesting. Now, I'm going to read two quotes. First one, how does the universe expect me to choose a career path at 16? I can't even choose what I want for dinner. Second, Abraham Lincoln said, I quote, the best way to predict your future is to create it. So, Abby, I want to know the choices behind your career path. Where and what did you end up studying at university?
I had a double major in international economics and Chinese. I studied at UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles.
And what influenced you to get into your choice of field?
I would say I had tiger parents. It was clear that I wasn't going to be a medical doctor or a lawyer. So I chose economics, which is, I would say, the next acceptable path for an Asian parent. I wasn't enjoying economics so much, so I added Chinese as my major just to spice it up a little bit.
And what professional roles have you had before that led you to start your own company?
After college, I worked at Grameen Foundation, responsible for the investments in China. Then I moved to Good Corporation, which is one of the leading forerunners within ESG auditing. It started over 20 years ago. I worked at Yara International. I also worked at KPMG. I also worked at Microsoft for many years. And my last role was the chief ESG and integrity officer at a publicly listed company in over 45 countries. And then I left to start Fortifai.
So what does Fortifai do?
Fortifai simplifies ESG regulatory compliance through streamlining workflows, data harmonization, and artificial intelligence.
What is your title and what is your main responsibilities?
I am the founder and the CEO, so I run around doing everything for the company to build it up.
What was the reason behind starting exactly this type of company?
I saw a missing need in the market. I've worked in the industry for over 20 years and working for all the major companies. I saw that there was a lack of understanding around how to harness data within your organization to make your sustainability and compliance program more effective.
What does a typical workday or work week look like for you?
Oh, it changes every day. It's a mix of customer work, sales and marketing, product development, admin. I just recorded a podcast right before this podcast. So it really changes every day.
I love the quote, choose a job you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. So Abby, what do you love about your role?
What I love is learning new things and doing new things every day. I think having worked in the industry for 20 years, you kind of get used to know exactly how it's going to look. I think starting a new company, you have no idea how it's going to look. And I think that's what's exciting and challenging. I like having flexibility, also doing things on your own terms, a reduced amount of politics while you're trying to create something and shape something new.
And what is the best experience you've had so far? Any examples?
We've had a lot. We're working with the third largest company in Norway, and now we're about to work with the fourth largest company in Norway. We've gotten some really great grants and a lot of traction just within the 7 months that we've formed. So far, everything is going really well, but that's not to say that there's not any challenges. But I would say there's always ups and downs within startup life, but overall, the trajectory is positive.
So what is the biggest challenge you've encountered so far and how did you tackle it?
Oh, it could be anything. I feel like it's one day it's really great, or the next day, you're recording a podcast and all your audio drops in the middle of this, senior executive call, and you're trying to figure out how to do that without looking unprofessional. So there's so many different things, or like, you're working with the customer, you have an important meeting, and then you get really sick and you're trying to like find your way to get through it. It's so many ups and downs. And I think that's probably one of the biggest surprises that you hear about it. But when you're in the middle of it, it's a totally another dimension.
And what do you wish everybody understood about your role?
I think the amount of uncertainty and the amount of moving pieces that happen when you do a startup, and like how much people can help, I would say that maybe they're not aware of, that as a startup, any kind of small support, introduction, even a like on a post really helps.
And what is the one common myth about your professional field that you want to disapprove?
I think that maybe women are not as good founders as men, or that women are not as ambitious as men. 3% of VC funding goes to female founders. So I would think there's a bias there in terms of how men are as leaders versus women.
And what do you love about working in the tech industry?
I would say the innovation, the pace of change, and how informal people are.
Oprah Winfrey said, I quote, think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is not a stepping stone to greatness. So, Abby, what has by far been your biggest achievement in your career?
Making it to the executive level of a publicly listed company and then leaving it to start Fortify.
What are the biggest factors helped you become successful? Any success habits you have?
It's the intrinsic motivation to do good in the world. I think I realized how privileged and lucky I was to be able to be born and raised in Silicon Valley during the rise of tech and the opportunities that came with that.
And how do you measure your own performance at work?
I would say to continuously see progress, I would say planning and having good communication, but we do have some KPIs that we measure ourselves against.
And with success comes failures. What is your biggest failure in your career and what did you learn from it?
Oh, I've had a lot of failures in my career. I would say that not being able to handle the politics effectively enough. I'm somewhat of a shooter that really moves quickly. So I think I have in the past, I could have done better in terms of handling politics and understanding where people are coming from.
What is inspiring and motivating you the most in your role and career right now?
I would say the opportunities. As I talk to more companies and they agree with the opportunities and the challenges that I see and why I started Fortify, it's really motivating to see that we're on the right path, that we are addressing a true need that companies face.
Powerful. Let us now jump into the influence of mentors, role models, champions, and sponsors. Role models can consciously or subconsciously be a powerful force in our lives. In addition, champions can stand up and advocate for us and open up the world of possibilities. Sponsors match emerging talent with leaders and influential employees who can help us move ahead in our careers. Abby, do you have a mentor, champion, or a sponsor today?
I have many. I think it's very hard for me to say one. I would say throughout my career, I've had different champions and different mentors and organizations that I worked with. But I think for today, like if you were to say who's my one biggest one, I wouldn't have it. But I would say that I have many great ones that I'm able to pull for when I need different types of advice. And I think that's been really great to have a network around you. So kind of having a board, your own personal board that has specialty in different subjects that you can reach out to when you have a question on those.
And who is your female role model you look up to in your field?
Oh, I wouldn't say I have one in my field. There's so many great leaders in my field. I would say that earlier in my career, I found the female leaders in the organizations that were in the senior positions, like Kimberly Lee Matheson in Microsoft or Tove Anderson, who's now at Tomra. I've looked up to them to see that actually women can make it to senior leadership positions when there's so few of them, I would say. They were definitely Julie Berg she was at KPMG, now she's at Aker Carbon Storage, being a foreigner, a female that actually made it to the partner level of organization. So there have been female role models that I have been following throughout my career and have appreciated from their advice.
History shows that it's been more common for men having mentors, champions, and sponsors in business than women. So, Abby, how important do you think is to have a mentor, champion, and sponsor during one's career?
It's absolutely important. I think, especially in the Nordics, which is so small and so relationship based. Really, I think to build your network as early as you can and as wide as you can is really important. I would say, some of my mentorships and relationships didn't come out from needing anything. I think how I made a relationship with Tova is more that as I left a company that we both worked in, I just went and thanked her. I said, thank you for actually being there. You don't know who I am, but I really appreciated you just being there, being the one female in this male dominated industry. And we just kept in touch and had coffees from that. So there wasn't really anything that I was trying to gain out of it. I was just trying to thank somebody. And as a result, the network increased. So I think for people, sometimes when they think about networking or they think about trying to build this, they get nervous. Like, oh, I don't want to disturb somebody. But really, it's just about building relationships and kind of honoring people and their role in your life.
Let us move on to leadership. Adina Friedman, president and CEO of Nasdaq, said, I quote, "Empower those around you to be heard and valued makes a difference between a leader who simply instructs and one who inspires." And Shirley Sandberg, ex-COO of Facebook, said, I quote, "Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that the impact lasts in your absence." So Abbey, what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership is to lead by example, but also not to enable others to work in their own path towards the same goal that you have. So it's allowing people to individually work the way that they do, but have a shared common goal and actually understanding what that goal is.
And what do you consider a good versus a bad leader?
A good leader shows the clear direction that they want everybody to follow, at least go in that direction. I think some leaders are very unclear. They maybe purposely hide the direction of the company to be able to hold different teams against each other or compete against each other. And they purposely make it not clear so that they hold all the power because they know what the real goal is. So a good leader is somebody who brings everybody into the same direction and helps them understand what the direction is of the company, but then allows them to individually do it in their own way towards the goal so that they don't have to be sheep in terms of following the leader.
And you did mention very powerful women in your field, but who is your favorite female, non-binary, or transgender tech leader and why?
Oh, tech leader. It's really hard to say. I would say one female tech leader that I admire is Timnit Gebru. If I'm pronouncing her name right, she was at Google. She was an ethics and AI researcher that I would say blew the whistle in terms of some of the challenges within their own company, and then ended up getting fired for that. And now she has her own foundation that she's working on. But I think it takes a lot of guts to do that, to fight a big corporation and to stand up for what's right. And I don't think everybody does that. So she is somebody that I'm very impressed by.
And how would you describe yourself as a leader?
I'm a work in progress. I think that I'm not going to say that I'm the perfect leader. I think I'm learning all the time, but I do understand that communication is important and that having an open line of communication is very important and that everybody is trying the best with the resources that they have. So I would say that I'm a work in progress, but I have worked for a very long time. So I have a better, I would say, understanding of what good and bad leadership is by seeing, working in the industry for over 20 years.
And as a leader, what values are most important to you?
Openness and communication and directness. It's really important to be able to speak freely. And I might not agree, but I think to be able to discuss it is very important. I think it's not easy all the time, too. Sometimes you're challenged in so many different ways. I think what's important in leadership also just to be organized also when you're coming in and discussing it, too, because sometimes you can be just so busy being pulled in so many different directions.
And what leadership lessons have you learned that have formed you into the leader you are today after 20 years in the business?
Oh gosh, I would say the definition of leadership is changing. I do think that is also something that you see over the years. If you think about what 20 years ago, leadership was a white man and how they looked and how they dressed, right? I would wear a suit, I would wear glasses to try to look older. And I think, over time, the definition of leader has changed because the types of leaders at the top have changed. So suddenly you have females in the top that are wearing dresses and you realize, okay, I can get away with this. And you have a female leader in the top that you realize, okay, you can, be soft-spoken and actually get what you want across, right? You don't need to act like a male and have, the elbows going in. So I think, that has been a learning and that really changes you meet leaders along the way that seem closer to you, that you recognize yourself in them, and then you try to model. You see, okay, that worked for that leader, and that's actually similar to me, so I can do that too. It gives you permission to be yourself more, so that by the time you get to the top, you have a little bit of your own identity on how leadership is, but it's taken from all of these mentors throughout your career that you see, okay, they were able to be successful by doing this, so I need to do this. But at one point, I think you get to the top and you realize there is nobody else for me to look like and copy. And I actually have to be myself. And that is very scary, I would say, that you need to do. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And trying to figure out, what is your authentic self and where does your background also shape it as a minority woman that might not have the same thought process or background as a white male. And I think these are constantly things. That's why I can't say I'm a perfect leader, because I'm still trying to figure this out right now.
And what are your 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses?
My strengths are that I always want to help. I always want to connect people, that I have ambition. I'd want to do something positive in the world. And I would say my experience that I've seen over the many years, specifically in my sector. I would say my 3 weaknesses are that I move too fast. I'm too direct sometimes. And then I can also be too reactive. So I can be, much for somebody who wants to take it easy and play golf and bring people along and take it slow. I just have the speed to me because I think I want to drive the change and I see the opportunity that might not be for everybody.
Let us now jump into the hottest topic in business today, workplace culture, unlocking the power of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Abbey, what do diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging mean to you personally?
Oh, I think this is also something that I'm learning, being a minority woman, and also from the time period that I came in where I felt like everybody was just trying to be like the white man. So you'd hide yourself into it. And I think it was only fairly recently within Black Lives Matter and, Stop Asian Hate around that time when I realized that I needed to separate myself from maybe just trying to be like the majority of the organization, that I actually had something to bring as a diverse person in the room. And I think that sometimes that was not even recognized from my peers. I think especially for Asians in general, that they're often seen very closely with the majority, with the white, that you don't think about it separately as actually like a different race until it really matters. So that sometimes it would be discounted, the experiences I felt of racism, because people can't even imagine that an Asian person would have racism. They could understand that an African American, of course, would have it, but they wouldn't understand other races would have it. So I think really that education process, and I am definitely learning. I'm not a subject matter expert into DI, but it's something that because I've had these experiences, I want to raise the agenda. And that's what I did in my previous companies and really talked more about it, trying to move the topic away from just gender, but to other areas of diversity. So I would say that I'm not an expert in this field, but just based on personal experience, it's something that I've been really pushing across the platforms that I have.
And what do you consider being 3 to 5 signs of good company culture if you were to join a company again?
I would look at their metrics that they state outside. What are their actual goals and their ambitions? But not only looking at what their ambitions are, it's actually their target towards them. And they're actually, I would say, the implementation of the target. So you could say, like, I have an ambition for 50% women in executive roles. Actually look at their annual report or their sustainability report and see, did they actually make those targets? Are there actually moves? Are they even talking about it afterwards? I think that's the true test of whether or not, their ambition is more than words. And that's what I'm so focused about in my company, is about how to make companies actually turn those ambitions into implementation. I would also, of course, talk to employees and talk to as many people that have been within the company to learn just the culture, because there's so many things that you can just read. But when actually for some people who have been in the company, talk to them and talk to people who are more like you. So talk to the female, talk to the person who may have the similar background as you, because they're more likely to have the same experience that you would going into the company.
And as a woman, what has been the most significant political or culture barrier in your career, and how have you overcome these challenges?
I think one of the challenges is that, I'll be honest, like growing up or even in my career, there has been nobody who's looked like me. I've often been the only person looking like me. So to even think that I can achieve what I can achieve was very difficult. Like, for some reason, I think it took it into my last company where it was an executive level that I didn't even think that it's possible for somebody like me to be a CEO because I'd never really seen anybody. And it never was even on my radar to be a CEO because you don't even think what you can achieve because you've never seen it, right? So for me to be a CEO of a company, I think that's really strange because that was never even considered in my career. And it's kind of, I fell into this because I saw an opportunity. But I think there are some people who go in being like, I'm going to be the CEO of this company, and they're really excited. But for me, it was never even a possibility to even think of. I just kind of leveled myself at where I thought I can be because that's all I've seen. And I think that's why role models are so important because then you see, okay, I'm not the only one there. Somebody else can make it there too.
And can you imagine then what you are creating now for the future of women that can see you where you are and know that they can get there too? Thank you for that.
I appreciate you saying that.
And why do you think it's important for more women, women of color, non-binary, and transgender to join the tech industry today?
Because tech is changing the world, right? And you see the speed of change, and tech is driving that. I really worry that minorities, whoever is not in the majority, is going to be left behind, or that the current biases that exist in this world are just going to go on speed, on overdrive. And, what in a manual process before could have limited impact now, a tech-driven, AI-driven process I would say it would increase biases x-fold, and we won't be able to stop it. And I think the more diversity that we have in tech, the more when we build the technology, we'll be able to put in some stop gaps, slow down, the biases, and try to prevent some of these from happening.
You did mention earlier about talking about the DEIB in your previous company. So how do you speak with your colleagues, peers, and community today about those challenges, for example, salary gaps and promotions, etc.?
One of the challenges I see being a minority, talking to somebody who's in the majority, is that unless you've had the lived experience, they don't necessarily get it. And for me, who have had racist, attacks and things growing up multiple times, it's on the top of your agenda because you know how unfair it is, right? But for somebody who hasn't, it's very hard for them to take it seriously. Even if the statistics are showing this, like 3% of women, get global funding. I think in the Nordics, it's maybe 0.7 or 0.9% of women actually get funding. But then when you talk to somebody about it, it's like, oh, well, there's not enough women going into tech. That's why. Oh, it's because women are not as ambitious as men and they don't take challenges. There's always a reason for it. Not actually, no, maybe there is actually racism, sexism, other things that you need to counter. And you need to counter it in a different way than just trying to measure it exactly the same as you would as a person in the majority. So I think that's been my challenge. I've mentioned it, I've talked about it, but when you are in the minority, it's very hard to get the attention. But I think podcasts like yours and what you're doing is just raising the awareness so that people can be a little bit more knowledgeable about this topic and hopefully change their own thoughts about it.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you very much. And about those challenges and barriers that you mentioned, there are many public internal discussions about them, about women of color, non-binary, and transgenders facing from reaching high position in the tech industry based on what you said and receiving funding. How do you feel has affected and is affecting you? And what is your advice on how to best unblock these roadblocks?
Yeah, I think there needs to be more organizations providing capital, I would say. There are some. There's Ostia Angels, there's Impact Shakers, there's a few across, but there's not enough. And I think that there needs to be funds set because there are a lot of training programs for women. There's a lot of online ones or courses, but without the capital, that's where you're at a disadvantage. A lot of companies within the majority, they just start with their friends and family and move on and then have the capital to move ahead. A lot of women or minorities don't have that access to that. So they're already starting behind. So how do you have a fund? And there are a few, there are just definitely not enough of those. And how do you make those more available that are just focused for those types of founders?
And you mentioned earlier about looking up companies in their annual report and etc. And today, tech companies do spend a lot of marketing money to attract women of color, and non-binary and transgenders. However, at the same time, they're finding it hard to retain them. Articles show that women are leaving the tech industry. Beyond that, companies are saying that they're investing in DIB. So what is your best advice on strategies on how companies can work to build a stronger corporate culture that engages DIB?
gosh, if I knew this, I could create a business and make a lot. It is so hard. This topic is so diverse. I would say really to take a bottoms up approach, because I think oftentimes it's top down. And oftentimes when it's top down, you already have maybe if the leader is diverse or not, you've made it to the top and you're running this and you might have forgotten how things are on the ground and how things are actually affecting people, right? So I would say that to start at the bottoms up approach and to actually really engage the employees, look at the data, right? Like, why are they leaving? Dive a little bit deeper into the data, not just saying 15% of the people are leaving. Why are they leaving? I think as you dive more into it, it's like, is it from one department? Is it from one area? Why is it from this area? Why, you need to keep asking questions. Don't just take the first number that you see that it's okay. I think that's what some companies do. They say, oh, well, we only have an 85% retention rate. That's great. But what's going on with those 15? Are they coming from one leader? Why are they doing that? Don't just take the overall number and say it's okay. Actually investigate a little bit more and you actually might find the answer. I think if you talk to employees, if you actually have a really good speak-up culture that people feel comfortable in talking, it's in their incentive to be able to make it better for them to stay. So if you're able to get that information out of them, I think you'll be able to find some really good tidbits of information that can help you.
And based on what you said, what would you say are the few factors of challenges of implementing a DEIB culture in a workplace and in the tech industry today?
Especially in the Nordics, where it is not so diverse, I think that the biggest challenges of DEIB is leadership not actually understanding or prioritizing this topic. I think you think about if a leader, it takes it as like, this is my biggest focus, not a side or not a nice to have. Change will happen, but it hasn't been for a variety of different reasons. But I think some of the reasons is because if you haven't lived the experience, you don't feel the burning urgency of it. And unfortunately, there's not enough women or minorities in the leadership position. And if they are, they don't want to be that one minority leader that's driving this agenda in the industry, right? So it's like, how do you get more people into the leadership and how do they all work together to be able to drive this change?
Why and how do you think companies would benefit from having not just women of color, non-binary, and transgender leaders, but actually higher gender representation at C-suite level and boardrooms with actual mandate?
That's a hard question.
Diversity of thought is very important, right? And if you want to represent your customers, your employees, you need to also represent them in the top. And I saw that being a minority, you think differently than the majority. And I think that that can be a positive thing, but I think that's also forces people to maybe work differently than they were working before. And that's difficult, right? Because if you have everybody the same in the room with the same culture and the same way of thinking, things are smoother. You go faster in that direction that you want, right? But if you have more diversity, you need to really stop. You need to think. You need to change the way that you're working. And that's difficult. But in the long term, you see all the studies that say having a more diverse boardroom or a diverse management team makes a difference in terms of profitability. But it's hard, right? And it takes a longer term strategic vision for that. And so many people are just working on the short term numbers. What can I get in this quarterly result? So they're not able to make that long term shift that would actually maybe make the company more profitable in the long term. But they're just thinking short term.
And what would you say is the biggest reason behind that we don't have more women of color, non-binary, and transgender leaders in the tech leadership roles and as startup founders still today?
Oh, I wish I knew the answer to that. They say there's a glass ceiling. I think there's a bamboo ceiling. I think there's a ceiling for every type of minority that is there. I think what I've heard before is that people are less ambitious. And I don't think that's true because I think you find ambition in every sort of person. I think it's the opportunities that are awarded to them or like not even awarded, but like given a chance, right? Are they in the right room when this job comes up? Have they networked with the right executive to have them on their radar into roles later on that they can be there, right? Just being in the room and not even being in the room, but also understanding how to network and work within the room and to seen as a viable candidate in the future. And I think there's so many biases in that people don't recognize themselves in the person. So then they're not able to see that moving forward. And I think that's where diversity is more. I see this all the time. When I hire a diverse team, that diverse team is going to hire a more diverse team. it comes in because you recognize it, but it takes time. There's a lot of politics in the way that slow things down. It's not an easy solution. So it's very hard for me to say how to fix this, but it is a challenge and I recognize it too. It's not fun being the lone minority in a company. And at one point, you just need to create your own path.
Another challenge that you've been mentioning is the percentage of the funding that women get. And yes, the data reveals a concerning trend of low funding rates of startups led by women, with only 1 to 2% of the funding directed towards women in the tech industry. Black and Latino women in particular receive less than 1%. What factors do you believe contribute to this imbalance, and what strategies can be achieved to increase funding for women-led startups?
Yeah, this is really, really difficult because there's so much implicit bias when you're talking to an investor. I think an investor's in their mind, they're like, how do I de-risk this portfolio of mine, right? I have companies that I need to pick. How do I de-risk it? Usually, if you think about it, the statistics, right? Who do they see running unicorns, right? Or who do they see running successful companies? Okay, white men, right? And then you think about who usually has the network if you needed more funding round to be able to get more. It's usually men who maybe have climbed their corporate career and have a really big network. Women, unfortunately, you see the kind of the pattern from the corporate side. There's not as many women in the leadership side. So there's going to be less women network for the founder coming in. So there's all these biases coming in terms of if they want to de-risk their portfolio, it's easier to go for a native speaker that has a network already from this top school that they already recognize that, has achieved A, B, C, and D. So when you come in, even with a great idea, from something that's a little bit foreign from them, they always find a reason, maybe your tech is not far enough or there's always a reason that they can say that's not necessarily related to being a minority. But I think there's a bias that maybe they don't even realize it, like because they can use the same bias. You can probably go to a lot of other companies like, well, they were at the same level, same funding and that, but there's always something that could be a reason. So it's really hard to say. I think investors realize this is an issue, but maybe don't realize that if they really care about this issue, then they need to look at it in a different way, not just measure it the same as you would. And I saw this at a Big Four that I worked at. Like, their idea of a diversity was having somebody who still volunteered for this political party, went to the best school, had a certain amount of grades, but the only difference was that maybe they're Black or Asian and non-white. That was the idea of diversity, right? And I think the whole idea of diversity needs to change also, especially in the Nordics, and the measurement also needs to change. You can't measure a diverse person against the majority and expect them to be 100% the same in order to fund them. And so I think that understanding needs to change.
And how much do you think the tech industry has changed regarding DEI since you joined?
I think it's changed a lot. Been in this industry for a while. I do think that you see leading tech companies in the US trying to do a lot. Can they do more? Absolutely. But I would say tech companies are pushing the trends compared to other companies. Like I was in Microsoft for 5 years and I saw the amount of work that they did in this area to try to move the needles and to set the targets. So I really appreciative of the work that they're doing and investment in it. Can they do more? Of course. Are they perfect? No, but they are, putting resources in. And the fact that these companies are leading in it, then other companies cannot say that they can't do it, right? So I think there is definitely a move towards it, but it can absolutely be better. Absolutely. But I do think that they have invested too.
Looking back on your career, what one thing would you have changed in your working environment to break the bias?
I think I would have spoken out more earlier in my career. I think earlier in my career, I was just trying to fall in line and try to move forward and not be seen, not stand out. Almost like I felt that my difference was more of a negative than a strength. I was already a foreigner in this country. So to try to fit in, right? And I think looking back, I think I probably had a little bit more leeway to be myself than I gave myself the opportunity to be. I would say, and especially now, I think now with the younger generation and people coming in, you can be more of yourself than you were before. And doing that, I think would also have, how do I say, in allowing myself to be more of myself earlier would have probably helped and broken more biases, right? Because they wouldn't have seen like, oh, there's this, Asian person that's exactly like a white person or that. They would have been like, oh yeah, okay, this Asian person does feel racism or, talking about different things. And that might have opened up a conversation more and an awareness more rather than them now saying like, oh, well, I knew of this Asian colleague and there was nothing different about, them. I could have been more of my true self earlier in the career.
And looking forward, what will you do as a leader and the powerful role model you are becoming for the next generation to improve the bias for other women, women of color, non-binary, and transgenders in tech?
Yeah, I think that this is a work in progress, as I've said before, but I do think that I'm learning. I'm being more active in groups with diversity in mind. I'm part of a founders group in Oslo for the Oslo Business Forum for founders that are multicultural. I'm also part of female founders networks. I talk more about the subject, more related to, I'd say, ethical AI and responsible AI, because there's a strong link around that. So I'm definitely trying to improve and learn more about these topics. I think, like you said before, and this is what I learned when I was in the senior leadership position, is that people do look up to you and see what, wow, there is a person like me in the leadership. And I don't think I really took it for granted until somebody came up to me and said that in my last role. And I think it's something that, just like you said, being in this role, trying to run a company, start a company, and just being here makes a difference. But sometimes you don't think about that because you're just trying to grow and, survive and create.
So indirectly, you are doing it by being you and doing the hard work you're doing for the company you're building.
Thank you.
Let us move on to another hot topic in business day, which is work-life balance and mental health. Abbey, you have, without a doubt, a busy lifestyle, running your own company, as you said, many hats is not easy. How do you take care of yourself to maintain a good mental health?
Oh, I think I can be a lot better on this, but I would say that's where my sleeping comes in. I sleep a lot, and that really re-energizes me. I throw myself into the ice water quite fairly often, and I do ice bathing, so that helps. I have an extremely supportive husband, so that is really helpful, where I could both talk to him about business and then also talk to him and sharing the responsibility at home. Really great friends that have been really, I would say, crucial in this process. I think that in my previous corporate careers, I was just all about work and just work, work, work for the company. And I think I didn't prioritize my friendships and my contacts and my networks. And that's something I'm really doing now. And I'm so appreciative of it.
Have you ever experienced burnout?
Oh, that's really hard to say. Have I experienced burnout? I'm trying to map my really long sleeps to burnout. But I think that I have had some really tough times in my career where I'm, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And what is this for? And I think sometimes it really makes you stop and say, is this worth it? Right. And I think that having those are very challenging, and they really have to listen to it and see, are you on the right path? So I think I've had those before, and they really stopped me in my tracks. And I really need to really kind of go back to who are you and what do you want to be? And I think eventually, if you climb high enough in your career or you stay long enough in a role, you're going to have that feeling. And I think it's what you do with that feeling is what's going to indicate how you move forward.
And what is your advice on how companies can create a more mentally healthy workplace in the new now?
I think an open culture is very important. I think that having people able to speak up and how they're feeling. I do think also creating a little bit more certainty. What I've seen in some companies is that it's so unclear what the goal is, or, what are people trying to achieve, that it creates a lot of uncertainty in the organization and where somebody is in a position, which creates a little bit more mental stress of, is my position safe? Am I going to get fired? What is this? Are they going to cut my team out? I think the more stability that you can create within the organization and shared direction, it reduces the mental strain that somebody has within the organization. So I think that's just one thing that I've seen in previous companies, or maybe more stress to employees, is that they weren't sure the direction of the company.
What motivates you every day to get out of bed, Abby?
To make an impact, to make a positive impact. I think realizing how lucky I am growing up, being born and raised in the Bay Area at the rise of tech. All of my grandparents, especially my grandmothers, had no education whatsoever. I was lucky to be, with the help, I would say, with my parents, really immigrating to a country with no connections, coming to the Bay Area, ending up at one of the best public schools in the US, and all the opportunities that it gave with me. And I think leveling the playing field is really a core, I would say, mission that I've ever had throughout my career and everything that I've done. So just having that intrinsic motivation to help and do good in the world, I think that really excites me. And I think I feel the closest to it as I've ever been now with Fortifai. So it's really exciting to be working on this.
And very inspiring to listen to. Now, let us wrap up with a few words of wisdom and a piece of advice for listeners. Abby, what is the best piece of advice you've been given that has helped you during setbacks in your role and career?
One thing that has been really eye-opening is that you're not alone. I think sometimes when something happens, you think it's all about you. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened to me. What did I do to deserve this? And then you realize actually this goes on all the time. Just realize you're not the only one. So many people have faced the same thing as you. And often it's not about you. Maybe it's an inconvenience that came in and they're thinking more about themselves than they are thinking about you. I think that helped me, like, having been through, so many of these, talking to other people and realizing, okay, you're not the only one that has been through this. You will survive this because you've seen this other person has done this. And maybe it's been a lot worse, or maybe it's been even not as bad as you, but they have survived this. And I think to keep moving forward is a good way.
And then what is the worst advice you ever been given and how did you tackle that?
The worst advice probably came from my parents or my dad, just saying, like, it doesn't matter if the job is boring, just stay. It's a stable income. It's a good company. It's a brand name. I think the immigrant parents, like, safety feeling. I think that's, something that I think I've had the privilege. I think our parents' generation, they didn't have that privilege to be able to say no. They had to have a secure job to be able to pay for raising their kids in this new country. And I would say that their gift is to give their kids the opportunity to do whatever they want to do. Maybe they couldn't have done that because of, their risk tolerance and their opportunities. But now they've given us the opportunities to do and dream big and dream bigger than they could ever have. And I think that's, where we really need to take it. And, our parents are usually right, but not always right. And so you need to kind of pick the advice you want to take.
Is there something you wish you would have known or skill you wish you had was starting out in the tech industry?
Yeah, I think the more technical skills that you have is good. I think my last coding class was when I was in junior high, so it's been a while since then. But I would say what's more important in the tech industry is your interest. For example, in 2019, I was just hearing a lot about AI coming out. And so I co-founded Oslo.AI with some Microsoft and Meta colleagues, just more on the interest of learning. I had no idea 4 years later I'd be starting a company on this topic. It was just pure interest. And through these quarterly events that we had, I learned so much and I networked with so many people just based on not trying to get anything out of it, just more curiosity of where this can go. And I think that's where more people have to come. I think there's a feeling of like, oh, I need to know a lot. There's going to be more tech people, like tech experienced people than me. I don't want to step in and look stupid. Go in there and just learn. People are so open in this industry. Like, I think they're just excited that somebody cares about the topic that they're working with. And I think if you go in with that mindset, there's not an expectation that you're going to be, the smartest person in the room. You don't need to be. You just need to be open and willing to learn.
And if you had the ability to go back in time to when you were just at the beginning of your career, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say that it works out at the end. I think, when you're early in your career, you're like, where is this going to lead? What am I doing with my life? How does this all fit together? And when you look back, they say, hindsight is 20/20. When you look back and you start to see all the pieces fit in, make sure that you follow your heart in every decision that you make. And maybe sometimes people make the decision off of their rational brain of, this is the amount of income I'm going to do. This is the stability I'm going to do. Like, really follow your heart. And I think it'll usually lead you in the right direction.
And what advice will you give to young girls, women of colors, non-binary and transgenders who want and trying to break into STEM fields today, especially wanting to become next generation leaders?
I think now more than ever, there are so many opportunities to come in to tech. There are so many organizations, so many interest groups, so many things that you can just show up and learn. So if you go to meetup.com, you just go in and just walk in and learn and talk to people. Start attending seminars. There's so many free online courses. I think that probably the biggest challenge is what area in tech, is going to be your focus area. And I think that's where you just need to almost go to so many different ones. And I think you have the luxury of time when you're young, right? I think the earlier you start, you can just go to different seminars, go to different events and say, oh, really, what piques my interest? And also talk to people and reach out to people. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, open a LinkedIn account. It could even say high school student on your profile, and then reach out to people that are interesting to you and just ask for, a 20-minute coffee chat. You'd be surprised, but, people are interested in people who want to know more about what they do. Not everyone gets to talk about what they do every day. So I would say keep at it. And if nobody responds, try a few more. I think you need to be okay with a little rejection in this industry to succeed. And the more you could hone and practice that skill, the stronger you're going to be later on.
Last but not least, Abbey, what is next for you in your role and career in tech? What are your career aspirations?
I want Fortifai to be a success. I want multiple companies. Like, we have high ambitions, I would say. Or if you see our financial projections for our company, we see a big need within ESG and for companies to actually implement it. And our goal is to help as many companies as we can find a cost-effective way so that you don't just see glossy reports talking about what their ambitions are, but actually glossy reports that actually talk about what they're doing in regards to ESG.
Amazing. I look forward to follow that. Thank you very much, Abbey, for being a guest on the Queens of Tech podcast, sharing your journey without a doubt, inspire change and reshape company culture for the next generation of women of color, non-binary and transgender leaders in tech.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for these thought-provoking questions.
Thank you for listening. If you have worked in the tech industry a minimum 3 years and would like to share your journey, please nominate yourself or somebody you know to i@jasminemoradi.com. For more podcast episodes and to learn more about the Queens of Tech initiative and to support us, visit queensof.tech.